Hello teachers, this Sunday we'll be teaching on the Tower of Babel and it is the last session of Unit 1, Session 5. So at least for the duration of each unit, let's try to connect each of the sessions together in the beginning of class so that we know, the students know how the narrative is moving from Adam and all the way down to Babel. And so there are some ways that you could prepare to review, especially if you haven't taught the other lessons. I've linked this in our Google Drive, the weekly email page. And so this has all in one document, all the key passages and the story point, Christ connections, so that you don't have to scroll up and down too much. This will help you to prepare for the review in the beginning of each class. But I think most of the Leader's Guide also have a review statement. So I think I took this from the older kids curriculum. And it says, Adam and Eve disobeyed God's command and sin entered the world. Sin spread to Adam and Eve's children, Cain and Abel. Cain sinned and killed his brother Abel. Because of Cain's sin, he was separated from God. Last week, we heard the story of the great flood where God was right to judge sin. God punished people for their sin because everything they did was evil. But God chose to save Noah and his family. God promised that he would never destroy the earth by a flood again. Today, we will see how people continued to sin and wanted to be as important as God. And if you look at the story points of each session, you could see how a lot of them interconnect. We see the story point for day 1, session 1, is God created all things for his glory. But the story point for this week, this session, is that God is great and deserves all worship. And God created all things for his glory means that all the things that we do and achieve and we work on is for God, not for ourselves. But the people of Babel, when they built the tower, they wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted a glory for themselves. They wanted to do it for themselves rather than God. And so, as people made in the image of God, living for his glory, when we start to do things for our own name's sake, it's basically saying, I don't want to be an image of God, but I want to be my own image. I want to glorify myself. And through these two story points that are connected, we also see the other story points about sin, that sin is disobeying God, sin is separation from God. And we see that happening in our passage this week as well. So if you look at Genesis chapter 11, it's only the first 9 verses that tell us our narrative for today. It says people wanted to make a name for themselves by building a city and a tower with its top in the sky. And they did not want to be scattered throughout the earth. So there is a virtue here that is valued by the world and also the Bible about unity. They want to be united. They want to work together. And why is that bad? And other questions pop up. The Lord came down to look at the city. And so as the people are building a tower up into the heavens, God actually comes down from heaven to earth. And he says something interesting. If they have begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. So why is it bad that nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them? Why is it bad for them to achieve things? Why is it bad for us to be doing hard things, accomplishing hard tasks? And people or even kids might question, why is that bad? Because they might grow up all their lives, people telling them, you can do whatever you want. You can Do whatever you put your mind to. Dream big, achieve great things. And we're always hyping our children to think about what they want to do in their lives and attempt great things. And this is definitely counter to what they have been hearing from even us. And so there are some questions that we need to answer here. So I've listed 4 questions here. Why is it bad that they were building together? Isn't togetherness good? Why is it bad that they wanted to stay together instead of scattering? Why is it bad that they wanted a name for themselves? Why was it bad that nothing would be impossible for them? So one thing we have to think about is that as we are reviewing, we could also remind our students that God commanded Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And God commands it again to Noah, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. But we see the people building the tower, they don't want to fill the earth. They want to gather in one place and make a name for themselves. So it is a clear disobedience to God and His commands. So when we are making these questions, do we have some kind of assumptions? We may need to get rid of them. Just like Eve questioned God's goodness, when we have certain assumptions, it may lead us to question God's goodness. Like when we are going through a hard time, do we assume that God is supposed to help us? And if He doesn't help us, that He doesn't care about us? That's a wrong assumption, right? And in the same way, does God not like unity? Does God not like hard work? No, those are all good virtues in the eyes of God, and we see that in the Bible as well. But no virtue is greater than loving God and obeying God, right? The world argues that love is love. We should be able to love whoever we want, and God is love, so He should allow it. Or if God doesn't allow a certain kind of love, that He is evil. So we definitely know love is a virtue in the Bible, but when those things become God in themselves, it's actually evil. And our children, it'll be helpful for them to know that unity is good, but if unity leads us to sin against God, then it is evil. Working hard is good, but if working hard leads us to stray away from God, then that is evil. So all these virtues might be good, but they can also be used for sin. And ultimately, these people were sinning by not obeying God to fill the earth, but wanting to stay in one place and make a name for themselves rather than God. The people of Babel, they were building this tower brick by brick. But all of our actions are like bricklaying. If all of our actions were a brick, how many of those bricks per day are going towards something like the Tower of Babel, living for our glory, making a name for ourselves, trying to secure our future? And how much of those bricks are going towards building something for God? God teaches us that we are to use our gifts to build one another up and to build up the church. And let's encourage the children to think about their gifts not as a way to glorify themselves or make a name for themselves, but to build up their brother and sister, to build up the church, to live for the kingdom, just like the missionaries, Eric and Ramona Reese. And so I think it'll be a good time of just helping them think about their future and what they want to do for God rather than for themselves.